All of you are here bright and early this morning. So we are here to talk about DevOps, cloud, the transformation which is happening in the market. I'm Aruna Ravichandran, Vice President of Product Marketing at CA Technologies. Very passionate about this particular topic, especially around DevOps. I want every one of you to basically introduce yourself, your name, your company, your charter, on what you're doing around DevOps. Tracy, we'll go with you first.
Sure. Good morning, everybody. My name is Tracy Bannon. I'm a senior architect with Deloitte Consulting. Now, I focus on cloud-native architectures. My background is as an app arch. But really, DevOps became a cornerstone part of what I do as an architect because I have to make sure that what I'm designing can be managed and what I'm designing can be pushed out and maintained in production. And it's interesting, Aruna and I have chatted about this at length, that DevOps really is something that we've done under different monikers for many, many, many years. It just seems that we're all pulling it together and naming it now. So, and with that, I'll turn it over to Sylvia.
Well, good morning, everybody. Hope you had a great day yesterday. It's a pleasure for me to be here. My name is Sylvia Prickle. I am the Managing Director at United Airlines, responsible for enterprise quality engineering and release management. And I'm happy to share with you some of the things that we have done at United in terms of introducing DevOps to our organization and where we're at today and where we're going in the future and how we're leveraging cloud as we're going to talk about today and dovetailing cloud into our DevOps strategy. So it's an honor to be here. Thank you very much.
Morning, everyone. I'm Nicole Forsgren. I'm CEO and Chief Scientist at DevOps Research and Assessment, DORA. What we do is we do research in the space to help organizations and the industry understand what key practices drive excellence in software development and delivery so we can all be high performers. We also provide assessment services, and prior to my work at DORA, I did research, and I was also software and hardware analyst and engineer at IBM and a sysadmin.
Great, welcome everyone. So, you know, DevOps is not a new topic in the market, and it's been there for, I actually think, you know, there are different forms factors when you think about DevOps. Do you actually think now DevOps is mainstream? Share with the audience your perspective on whether it's mainstream, what kind of changes you see happening in the market today. So we'll start with you.
Sure. So do I believe that it's mainstream? Absolutely. I tell the story, and it's a true story, that I am Dev, married to Ops, so as long as I can remember. My husband and I, years ago, worked with AccuWeather, and if there was a problem, they would call our house, because inevitably, they would get both engineering and operations. So is it mainstream? It absolutely is. The challenges that we see with it, though, are getting to a definition that everybody in the enterprise or in the organization agrees to. Because what I call DevOps, and I'm sure Sylvia might have some different things that she puts underneath that umbrella, as well as Nicole. Even as we work in this space all the time, the definition is very different. And so I think that driving the definition will help with the sustainability of this, and when we say it's becoming mainstream.
So you've seen a lot of customers of yours actually implement it?
Many implementing it, many trying to implement it, and quite frankly, if I look across portfolios and help my clients in rationalizing their portfolio, one of the things I realize is that they usually have pockets of DevOps. They have different, there are multiple different principles or tenets. So they might have continuous integration. They may have automated unit testing. They may not have gotten down the route of having any kind of software-defined infrastructure, but they have pieces and parts. And sometimes it's helping them to understand where are you on your journey, and really where is it going to make sense for you to implement any type of DevOps capabilities?
Yeah. I would say it's still evolving. I think many companies are at different phases in the DevOps journey, and so therefore I'm not sure if it's quite mainstream yet,
okay.
Right? It's not fully accepted across all industries and all companies, and not fully implemented, and I do believe we're still trying to define it. It's only really less than 10 years old, the entire DevOps concept. I think it's spun off of Agile and the Agile Manifesto, and it's a whole different way of working. So I think it's very, very rapidly becoming mainstream, in my opinion. So
So this would be an interesting conversation. This
Yeah.
could be a whole afternoon on, did DevOps follow Agile? I still maintain that so many parts of the principles that are there, the core tenets, the things that are there, I've been helping my clients who have more of waterfall implementations. How do they leverage some of those same techniques where they may not have Agile delivery yet? But that's a whole nother, that's a religious debate there.
Yeah, I'd
So
love
Nick-
to have that.
So with Nicole, this is the 4th year you guys did the State of the DevOps report, right?
Yes.
Which just came out in June. Based upon the research, do you think DevOps is mainstream? Can you give us a little bit of history in terms of what research has actually found in the last couple of years and where we are right now?
Sure. Who here has heard of the State of DevOps report? Hands? Okay, a few hands. So I'm the lead investigator on the State of DevOps report, which we do. So Dora is myself, the founders are myself, Gene Kim, author of the Phoenix Project, among other books, DevOps Handbook, Jez Humble, author of Continuous Delivery, Lean Enterprise, DevOps Handbook. We partnered up with Puppet to work on that report the last 4 years. And so what this is it's actually the largest investigation into what really drives development and delivery with speed and stability and excellence to date. And so when I started working on this, I was a professor, and so it really is academically rigorous. And so I think there were a couple questions in there. And so the first one is, am I seeing this being picked up across industry, and what kind of trends am I seeing? And in part to Tracy's comment, it depends on the definition. I think in part it also kind of depends on the terminology we use, right? And so words have power and definitions matter. Words definitely have power. And so when I talk to my customers and when I go into the industry, we use and we throw around different words interchangeably, sort of depending on who the CIO is and who the board of directors are and what words they really love and what words make them super twitchy. Right? So who here has someone in executive leadership that loves the word DevOps, and so every single proposal has the word DevOps all over it? Or who here has someone for whom DevOps makes them super twitchy, and so you do a find and replace and DevOps is taken out, and so instead you use digital transformation or technology transformation. And so none of those are going to work because someone got burned super hard by a team was going to come in and do the thing, and it failed super hard because they didn't do it the right way. And so instead we're going to use technology and practices and culture to deliver value for the business, right? And that's the really super hard find and replace instead. So I think that's what's really important, is that we are leveraging, and that's what the research has shown, is that we are leveraging technology and process and practice and culture to deliver value to organizations in smart, iterative, fast ways. And that's what is making this movement different from what we found in the 80s and 90s, where we were just buying the technology and crossing it off the list and moving on, and that just fundamentally didn't work. And that's why everyone for years has thought technology as a cost center, is because back then it was, because we were doing it wrong.
But that's also the tech, to your point, the definition it really does matter. And
Yep,
that's why
it
a
does.
lot of times when I'm having the conversations with my client, part of the initial conversation is, how are you defining it? What is your perception? Because by understanding that, then you can see where they are. And is it speed? Is it quality? Is it stability and excellence? What is it that they're striving for? And then taking that backwards. So understand their definition, and then getting back to what I call the whys. Right? There's a reason that they're latching onto this. Some latch onto it because they systemically have problems with their operations groups, because of the time it takes things to happen, because there's such a hard handoff that comes with a 900-line Excel spreadsheet of all of the different things that people have to do in order to move something across. For others, it's that the business really wants something changed right now, and they're trying to make that happen more quickly. So the imperatives that that my different clients want, it's really seminal for me to understand after I understand what their definition is. And to your point, the definition is really not set. It really isn't. It's very messy and muddy and ugly.
I think the definition isn't set, but we know what it's not. right? So it's not what it kind of was, and I kind of mentioned this previously, but I kind of want to iterate it. It's not what it was in the 80s and 90s, which was buying technology and crossing off the list and moving on, right? So there was a paper published in Harvard Business Review in 2003 by Nicholas Carr titled, "IT Doesn't Matter." Because we were doing it wrong, right? So that's definitely what it's not.
True.
But yeah, what it is sort of amorphous and not super well defined, but I think I rush the stage at the end and tackle me if I'm wrong. But I think it's generally a set of like tooling and automation practices and a set of processes adopted from Lean and Agile and good architecture and a good culture.
I was going to say, I'm glad you added on the final and.
Oh,
and
for
the
sure.
culture.
And
the
good culture that is collaboration and reaching across boundaries and
Federative
empathy
mindset
and federative
transparency
mindset and transparency and information flow and trust and empathy and
So if you have to summarize, right, so there are multiple different definitions for
Right.
DevOps, but you can say that it pretty much bridges the wall between the dev and the ops teams in simplistic terms by using three main ingredients. One is going through a cultural transformation, which is loud and center in the heart of DevOps. And the other one is adopting the right tools and technologies across the board. And last but not the least, based upon the primary business drivers customers have. And when I've talked to various different customers and prospects in the industry, and I'll ask them the question, why are you doing DevOps? I always get answers around 5 different categories. They could have a quality initiative. It could be an agility or a time to market. It could be a customer experience. A fourth one could be security or risk and compliance. And last but not the least is cost, right? And these are the 5 different categories which I've usually seen customers. Do you guys agree? Are there any other reasons on why people actually want to implement DevOps?
I think those are that's a fair buckets to start with. I mean, multiple people are going to have multiple reasons to do this. It's no different than if I go in to understand a solution or a system or a platform that a client is looking for. I have to take a step back and understand what their software quality attributes are. What are the ilities and the things that they're looking for? What are the imperatives? And then start to map that to what a solution is. And DevOps it's like saying architecture. There's a whole lot that falls under architecture. There's a whole lot that falls under DevOps. So it's
For me, though, as a practitioner in the field, I've been in technology over 30 years, and I think it's a matter of making technology fun again, right? Making working on technology, developing solutions exciting, and really feeling invigorated and excited about the successes rather than always beat up over the failures, right? So historically, because IT is a cost center, because there's more demand from the business, we were always under the gun, right? Always under the pressure, always, and it's tiring, right? And you go home at the end of the day and you're like, God, why did I pick technology as a field, right? But in my opinion, what I've seen with some of the principles of DevOps is this openness, collaboration, and working together. And people actually, as Nicole said, really truly trust each other, and each and every individual on the team is a contributor and an equal stakeholder in the decision-making process. And that just is a phenomenal, I mean, if you witness it, how many of you have seen like collaborations, pods, co-location of teams within IT? You got your developers, you got your testers, you got security, you got your business product owners in working together in a team. Anybody ever see that? I'm just curious, right? I mean, that actually work. If you see it and witness it and watch it evolve and see some of the output, it's phenomenal. It's exciting. People are actually excited to come in, believe it or not. They're excited to come in and work on that day's story. They're excited to see it evolve and get released in a time frame that is, something they can remember, right? So historically, again, time frames for app devs, we used to be months or years, right? So you really never saw the fruits of your labor. But here you see your fruits of your labor every single day. So I think it's a phenomenal concept.
It's a trust builder. I don't know how many times in my course of my career where a waterfall was going on, and the business came to look at what they were getting far enough along, and people would say, what is this?
Yeah.
Especially when you're talking for some contracts that could be 2-3 years. So it presumes that I know everything that I'm going to want in 3 years up front when I'm collecting it. But there's a lack of trust that starts because I have to give you more requirements. I have to give you more, and then I don't trust that you necessarily know
or understand
what I'm looking for or that you understand. So the trust is a major part of it. It really is.
So, let's talk about that, right? So cultural transformation is a big part of DevOps. Can you share from your experience, because what I've seen is that culture becomes a big topic, but it's one of the hardest thing to actually accomplish with an organization. If you look at the newer companies, the companies which are born digital, like Netflix and Amazons of the world, they are wired that way, and it's much more easier for them to, embrace DevOps practices. Yeah. But on the other hand, companies which are transforming digital, or the horses, the unicorns and the horses. So the horses, which I actually call transforming digital, it's much more harder to basically embrace the change. Like you said, the teams are might not be co-located. You might not even know your operations counterpart across the board.
That's right.
So share with us, what are some of the cultural transformations you have seen or have implemented within your organization? And it's you can't do it immediately, but it's small baby steps in order to actually achieve that. So can we talk about some of the examples in your customer base?
So my clients go from commercial the whole way over to federal, and dealing with the federal government. Some of the biggest challenges that I see is actually the organizational structure, because it has grown and matured, very mature, but based on waterfall. And it's based on the handoffs, and it's based on the checklists and the accountability that come with the slivers for waterfall. What I'm seeing become very successful with my clients in the federal space is not necessarily trying to do a complete organizational transformation around it, but to pluck out the program. And they usually have a couple of major programs where they have monies focused, and having that be the champion project, and allowing that organization to put together what I call a dojo mentality, where the federation is happening from the people from the different organizations. I'm finding it's not a technical challenge. It very much is a cultural challenge. More in the commercial space, it's interesting that some of my commercial clients have exactly the same challenges, because they may be, especially in the financial industry and with healthcare, they've been around for a long time too. So they are going through it, although they seem to have a little bit more freedom at time with their worker base to be able to exact some of those changes. Sometimes union, and it's interesting, can be a hard sell to the union around operations, because I'm changing what you do. Now I'm trying to help you to get more time that you can focus on this, but there's a lot of fear that can come with that. Sure. Across the board, though, it is picking a right-sized effort to champion, and making sure that there is both a bottom-up excitement, to your point, as well as someone who is an executive champion, who's truly bought in and has time to be bought in. The one failure I see across the board is that the executive champion, it's oftentimes extracurricular, something they have to do on the side. And when push comes to shove and they need to have their other products, their other teams, their other things, that's their day job, they sometimes have to take a step back and can't be as involved. And that's a lot of times where I see some failure. I'd be interested, I mean, you own releases and those things. I mean, have you seen that as well with some of your teams when they're trying to get down this path?
Yeah, I think to your point, it is baby steps, and it's one. I love the program approach. Pluck out a program and then kind of harness folks around that particular effort and keep them focused on that. And that's exactly what we started at United with, one program at a time. And success kind of breeds success, right? So you see the outcome and the throughput and the velocity, as well as the improved quality of these pods of teams working together, and other teams begin to get attracted to that, and they want to know, well, what are you doing that that we're not, right? And it starts really, I think Aruna's right, it really starts with the people. And one of the qualities, so technologists, at least in my opinion, typically, we tend to be, and I hope I don't offend anybody, we tend to be kind of control freaks, right? So, everybody
Who here's
wants,
offended?
we want to be, we want to be the decision maker. We want to have control over an initiative. And in a DevOps culture, you relinquish all that control. You're a servant leader. You share that power amongst the team. Everybody is an equal, like I said, an equal decision maker and a stakeholder. And that is a huge pivot, in my opinion, in a technology organization, a huge pivot. But once you get there, that's when everything accelerates and just blossoms, right? And then you bring in the tools, then you bring in the practices, and then you bring in, the operation side and the technology and cloud, and all of those kind of just add to that framework to kind of continuously evolve.
That change from having a control, someone who is ultimately, you will always have accountability.
Yeah.
But if you think about what that does for folks when it comes to a culture of being able to make a mistake.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
So if I am the only person in charge, I'm going to do anything I can the whole way down the stack to make sure nobody underneath my purview makes a mistake, because ultimately it tracks back to my mistake. Whereas if we're sharing,
right,
and I'm sure I know we've talked about this a little bit before, if we're sharing the responsibility in a different way, I actually want to fail fast,
right?
And I learned to become more open about failing in public, and failing in a public forum and having the acceptance of the team that's a natural part of what we do is cornerstone.
Yeah.
And that is probably one of the most difficult mindset shifts. 'Cause I don't fail in public.
Yeah.
My team doesn't fail in public. Well, yes, you do.
Yeah.
Here are my metrics. Here's where I'm doing well. Here's where I'm going to improve. That's kind of hard to open up the kimono.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
what about, talking about, from a process and a technology perspective, what are your guys' thoughts on, can you be successful in DevOps without Agile? Are they too independent? That's a topic people ask you all the time, right? Like, if you're still doing waterfall or
So what do you
Scrum
mean
waterfall.
by agile? Do you mean capital A agile, or do you mean moving fast? Being agile.
Meaning Agile, right? Like,
Being agile.
Yes.
Okay, no.
So give us a perspective, right? Like, so being, are those two things independent of each other? Do they need to work together in order to be successful?
Lowercase a, must have.
Yeah.
Uppercase
you have to be able
A.
to work agile.
We can argue
Agilely.
that. You have to
Agilely.
think
You have to
nimbly.
be
You have to be
capital
nimble.
A agile? Do you have to do the capital A agile? No.
No.
But it helps.
Sure.
Sure, it can. But if think about the tenets, right? If we go back to the manifesto, if I
Yeah,
think about
sure,
those things, I
absolutely.
can do that in a waterfall. I can have transparency. We can share. I can let you drill down into the reports. I can let you see the outcomes of what's going on. I don't care if you're waterfall, hybrid, agile.
Do you have to do your
Daily
meeting
stand-ups?
standing up instead of sitting down?
But no, it doesn't matter. But let's
you have
let's
to
touch
do
base for
safe?
10 minutes.
No.
Right. Let's talk, and let's make decisions together, and let's do it in a forum where we are sharing the data points.
But I would argue, so I don't know, this might, again, talk about definitions of what DevOps is. So I would argue that in a very mature DevOps organization, you definitely have CI/CD. And you have a framework that enables, right, from beginning to end and into production and post-production, everything automated, everything monitored, and you have continuous integration, continuous testing, and continuous deployment. That's where velocity and agility come into play.
Yes. And all the
right?
data shows that, right? I mean, I've got 23,000 data points across dozens of industries, companies of all sizes around the world, showing everything that Sylvia just said, right? So all of those technical practices, several capabilities that draw from the lean
Exactly.
and agile movements are predictive of your ability to develop and deliver software with speed and stability, which in turn drives organizational performance, which is profitability, productivity, market share, effectiveness, efficiency, customer satisfaction. So you do need those things.
Well, you need the measurements.
And the measurements, yes.
You have to understand what you're driving towards and be able to measure towards that. And I do agree with you that agile principles on top of all of this is what's cornerstone. I have a couple of clients that they actually have legislative mandates. Congress puts down times and dates that they can or cannot change software. So while they are attempting to be agile, there's a stopping point. So they actually go through everything, deploys to a final environment prior to production, and then they enter into, I call it putting the bookend, the waterfall bookend. They enter into one final user acceptance testing period so that it soothes everybody, and they're ready for that point where they are allowed to make the blue-green switch, where they're allowed to do that. So there are obviously different business imperatives, right? Different legislative imperatives that can impact it. But overall, I think it sounds like we're pretty much on the same shades of gray.
So Sylvia, you talked about some of the key practices like CI/CD, continuous testing, continuous monitoring. I think based on the state of the DevOps report, one of the learnings you guys had in 2017 was that there are two emerging practices which are very important when you actually think about DevOps implementations. One was around continuous testing, or testing,
Continuous testing was 2016 and 2017. Yes, we
2016,
reaffirmed.
and the other one was security.
Yep.
So can we talk about, so testing has been there since the day, software development has been several decades or so, right? And we have constantly talked about test automation, right? And the whole testing discipline has actually evolved in the market over the last couple of years. But this new concept called continuous testing has, people are talking about it. So share with us.
And CA did a fantastic report around continuous testing.
Yeah, but I actually want to understand, your thoughts on what do you mean when you say continuous testing, right? Like, so is it test automation is about automating the entire discipline across testing, whether it's GUI functional testing, it's performance testing, it's user acceptance testing. Yeah,
508
exactly.
compliance.
So how have you seen continuous testing practices evolve in your customer base or within United Airlines?
Want to start?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Sylvia.
Oh, okay. So this is my view of how I think things are going to evolve. Having responsibility for quality within the United organization, we were very manually oriented. So all of our testing was done manually, majority of them. So when you implement a CI/CD framework, it requires you have to kind of accelerate your testing capabilities. And the best way to do that is through automation. So right now we have continuous testing within the framework across the phases of the SDLC. And that's working really, really well. So, and that's why I'm thinking the big A Agile really helps enable that even further because you're working in smaller increments of work. So you create a build, you drop the build, you're constantly testing, you're integrating regression, security, load and performance, boom, done, right? And you get an automated framework that enables that pipeline very nicely. And you have the ability to fall back because you're versioning, hopefully everybody's versioning, all of their builds nicely. So in the event there is an issue and you have to fall back, you have to fail fast, you just basically fall back and then rebuild. And so that cycle can be very, 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 very quick. But what I see evolving even more is and you heard the concept of shift left, right? So the more that you could engage in the development cycle, the testing, and integrate the testing within the development cycle, you can even go faster.
Yes.
So that's why I see, as a testing organization, I see our organization evolving more from quality assurance to quality engineering, where we provide the capabilities and more of a center of excellence, the standards, the governance, the oversight, the capabilities. We engineer solutions that enable the app dev teams to integrate testing within their development cycle. And I think, and same with security, right? We want to if you can develop with security in mind and pass your security criteria while you're developing, well, guess what? I mean, that just makes things all that much faster. It comes out cleaner, and it goes through that entire framework much quicker.
That has been a culture shift as
Yes.
well.
Yes.
Because normally in many organizations, once I get to a certain phase, I then submit it to the security people, right? I hand it over to them, and then I'm given back a report that terrifies me, and also means that we have to push the dates out by a couple of weeks or months. And there's usually a firestorm that comes with that, and things rain down from the heavens, and nobody's happy. By bringing cyber, by bringing security to the table from the very beginning, having them to help to educate developers, putting security tools in the hands of the developers so that they can detect defects that they are able to is a cornerstone part of this, and it's also very difficult. Folks are pushing back on that because security, we're all nervous about security. We're just nervous about security. So do I want my developer to know all of the security holes? Well, actually, yes. If they're the people who are supposed to be building these things in such a way that they are more secure, I want them to be aware, and I want them to have all of those tools. That piece of bringing the federated team together has probably been more challenging than the agile aspect of putting business with developers. That was a bit easier because it felt like more of a show and tell. This is trying to get collaboration without ceding total responsibility, because at the end of the day, especially for the government clients and the state sector as well, security has the final sign-off. So I can shift as far left as I want to and do as much of it there. My goal for those clients in particular is to make sure that when it goes to cyber, that they don't get a whole lot back when they run their scans and on their reports. I want their job to be a bit easier so that it can move through, to your point, much more quickly.
Yeah. And then, when you talk about changing that culture, we can do this so many different ways, right? So part of it is giving them the tools, changing the conversation, educating your dev team, but even doing things like inviting cyber and inviting InfoSec to your weekly or bi-weekly demos. Letting them see what's happening and being developed so that they're part of the team. And it's interesting because sometimes those dev teams are like, no, like this is the dev thing. But when you invite security in and let them poke holes, but not like mean poke holes, right? But like let them see what's happening, it changes that culture and it changes the conversation, and suddenly like the first one or two end up being a little different. But it changes what those demos are like, and they can see what's happening, and they end up spotting things much earlier and in a much different way because it's so much more interactive. And so then it's also not just, although very, very important, it's not just teaching the dev team about how to like rip apart and like do all the hacking and then giving them all the tools, but it's also how to see and notice in an interactive way how to do a super early pen test, but also how to spot it in a live and interactive demo.
Well, it helps both sides because they are now gaining from each other. They're learning from each other, right? So the cyber is understanding how the developers are thinking, and they can provide better, safe, secure coding standards, right? They can also help them to be thinking in a different way, and the same in reverse.
It's a regular cadence conversation. Heaven forbid we all become friends.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about testing this out. From an agile perspective, you write stories, and the stories are around a functionality or something that you're developing. So it's truly a developer's tool. But there's no reason why you can't create sprints around security or sprints around infrastructure or sprints around building out environments, and embed those sprints within your stories. So that when you're working on those sprints, you don't have to have security with you the entire development time, right? You just have to have security with you while you're working on that particular sprint or story that incorporates security. And so, I don't know, we haven't gone to that level yet, but I think
with one of my teams.
It sounds really interesting.
With one of my teams, we've done that, and we leverage persona-based design as well. So we have security as one of the topic areas, and building out security stories is very relevant, and bringing them to the table because they become a stakeholder.
Right.
So then there's a double investment. It kind of gets rid of the unintentional, but often their antagonism that can come between security.
You know,
I think
can
it's the
understand.
cultural change.
It is, yeah.
Because if you, we talked about, on the quality side too, it used to be a center of excellence, and security tends to be a center of excellence too.
True.
Trying to change that mindscape, it's not like you're going to integrate and bring the security folks to as a part of the development teams, but bringing them to collaboratively work with each other, and your thought process on actually having security stories, I think will basically facilitate that. And there are tons of tools in the market, which pretty much, because one of the key things you mentioned was that how do you provide access to your developers so that they can start thinking about security much more earlier on as you try to shift left.
There's probably a very simple thing to state, and I don't want folks to laugh about this, but the transparency that you can provide through shared dashboards, through whatever mechanism that it is, so that people are curious, they'll go and check. So if I allow everybody who's involved with the program and the project to have access to drill down and to see what happened with the last build and to see where things are going well and not so well, it ups my game because I want to do a better job. But at the same point, I'm curious, and I now have that transparency, and I don't feel as though somebody's trying to hide something. And that's part of that cultural teardown. So I know it kind of sounds like a love is like a cloud statement, but
You say that like it's obvious. So that's one of the core capabilities that's predictive of developing and delivering software with speed and stability. Sounds like I've said it a bunch of times, right? Because this is kind of a core key differentiator and driver of value. We did an assessment with a very large financial institution, and that came back as one of their key constraints, right? As one of their key blockers. And they were like, what do you mean? But we do this. And I'm like, I don't know, right? Like, this is a key blocker. So here's what you need to be doing. You need to be like, this is the definition, right? Definition's important in terms of being a key predictor. And they went back to their teams and they were like, oh, oops, so we had this thing and we inadvertently turned it off 6 months ago. Right? So we know it's important. We know it's like this key driver. The most innovative companies are doing it, but several organizations are not. And sometimes we do this thing where like, oh, we turned it off by mistake, we didn't think it was super important, or like we got busy doing other things, people stopped looking at it, we didn't think it was actually really all that important, and then they turned it back on and their performance skyrocketed. They just, like the leadership just didn't think it was really that important because, I mean, all of our teams know what's happening anyway. No, just having it there is a big deal.
So feedback monitors are important.
yeah, that's true too.
So we have 7 minutes. I do want to give an opportunity for the audience to ask questions. So one last question before I hand it off to the audience is, one of the key things is, how does success look like, right? We talked about the drivers, but the metrics in terms of being able to measure the success of DevOps implementation, every customer has different drivers across the board. So I know from the state of the DevOps report, you guys have established certain key criteria, various different customers and prospects have actually implemented. Can you talk about that, Nicole? And then we'll have every one of you give your point of view on how you measure success.
Sure. So, like one of the hardest things is what's success. The very end value of success, the answer is always going to be it depends, right? So that will, and I think you covered that really, really well, Aruna, right? There, you had like 5 categories, 5 buckets. Your end value of success is going to be really, really context dependent based on what your organization is. Is it customer success? Is it retention? Is it profit? Is it not for profit because you're in government? Is it utilization? Now, one step back from that though, I've said this a million times, I used to be a professor. If I was a professor, there would be a quiz right now. It would be your ability to develop and deliver software with speed and stability. We have found across 4 years of research now that this is a key value driver and differentiator across all contexts, across all organizations, almost anywhere. And it's, again, like speed and stability. So it's lead time for changes. Now I'm like blanking as I like hurry up. Deploy frequency, MTTR, and change fail rate. And that's in the last 4 years of State of DevOps reports. And it ends up being a key differentiator and also a classifier for high, medium, and low performance teams.
Sylvia?
Yeah, aside from the increased velocity, agility, and efficiencies, to me, success is, I've been in this industry so long, the success is not waking up in the middle of the night because there's a P1 or P2 incident as a result of release, right?
High five. So true.
You know, it just, and since we've implemented this collaboration of various folks from different teams working together, our success rate to production has skyrocketed. And the number of defects leaked and the number of outages as a result of those releases has decreased. And the velocity, which is just phenomenal, the velocity has increased. So we're releasing more, we're releasing faster, and the quality is better, and the customer satisfaction is much better. And our business partners, so get this, used to be always our business demand was more than we could consume, right? It's now the other way around. We're pushing out so much new code, the business is having a hard time keeping up with us. And that's a wonderful, that's a really wonderful place to be. And it's seriously happening. So that success to me is not waking up in the middle of the night with the P1 outage.
So, well, I have to agree with both of you, ladies. At the end of the day, identifying what's most important to each one of my clients and making sure that I sit down with them and that we identify a lean set of metrics and that we do measure and that we publicly measure and we talk about what the measurement means, so we're either improving or figuring out why we're not improving. I mean, there are mean time to recover, churn, right? How long does it take something to actually get through? Change set failure rates. All of those things can be important if we are talking about applying a law of constraints and understanding for that organization where their biggest challenges are. Usually the metrics will follow on to the constraints because I'm addressing the constraint and therefore there's going to be a measure that goes along with that. So.
Okay, so let's open it up to the audience for questions.
Hi, great presentation, discussions, thank you very much. With larger organizations, since DevOps is so cultural, are you finding that it's a center of excellence? In other words, how do you kind of like establish all your best practices, your lessons learned? I mean, do you find that a center of excellence is the easiest way to do that, or are there other strategies you're using to, you know, communicate and drive the cultural changes?
So I can speak from a Deloitte perspective. We're kind of pivoting on the idea of a center of excellence because it carries with it all of the baggage of what centers of excellence have been for so long. And embracing, I would call it more of a dojo concept, whether it's tied to a major program or whether it is across the entire organization, making sure that there is some place where people can go and can touch and can feel and be mentored and bring their problems and have somebody talk them through with them is a huge part of it, because then it becomes real. It's not necessarily sending somebody away for training, but it's giving them someone who can talk to. The other piece about a center of excellence is that oftentimes center of excellence is synonymous with kind of a heavy-handed governance. So how do you change it from governance to enablement?
Right.
And that's a cultural shift in that group. But I do recommend putting together some kind of federated experts team.
Yeah. Sometimes it's also just another silo.
Yeah, you got to be careful.
You have
that
to
that
really
doesn't
careful. Yep, exactly.
Yeah. KRS Murthy. What I liked in the panel here is that you are converging into a solution versus when men sit, they start arguing, they diverge. Congratulations on that. And I like the moderation. You are a participative moderator. That's a very good skill set that you have. Good one. Now on the benchmarking, within the company, multiple teams may be there depending on the size of the company, multiple projects, serial, parallel, whatever it is, or between the companies. That's going to be very, very important. Benchmarking from a neutral, anonymized, normalized approach to benchmarking. Anyone has tried about it, thought about it, and what are your perspectives coming from different angles.
Well, I work closely with Nicole. I'd actually say you're probably the person to really talk about
Be
the
happy to
benchmark.
field that question. Dora offers a fully anonymized benchmark solution. We have over 23,000 data points around the world, anonymized, normalized, across industry, by industry vertical. We do not ever recommend, nor do we provide a benchmarking team compared to team within organization. I can benchmark teams to larger groups. So if I can do a team compared to the whole company, I can do a team by industry, I can do team by industry vertical. Yeah, because I'm sure that companies will like take the reports and like hold them next to each other to try to compare teams, but that is a anti-pattern, right? You don't want to compare teams next to each other because that's, well,
A university could be independent.
come find me later. All the research shows, by the way, that's also a Nicole drinking game. All the research shows you don't want to be comparing teams.
So we have time for one last question.
So Jason Bloomberg with Intellix and contributor to Forbes. So the panel was decidedly lukewarm about Agile, right? Agile with a capital A, the software development methodologies. And I'm just wondering, even though you mentioned sprints and stories, so there's a bit of Agile scattered through the discussion. What happened to Agile? Why isn't it critically important?
Do you want
for
us to
DevOps?
hate something? I don't like SAFe at all.
Okay.
Do we want to
Well,
fight?
we can pick on SAFe, but Agile generally, what's the story?
I wouldn't say that we're lukewarm. I would actually say we're pretty passionate about it. But
I like
from an
it.
observation perspective, the adoption is more difficult than people realize. And we can be a zealot towards the capital A, or we can help them adopt principles that will get them towards the capital A by making it a lowercase. And not to be too wishy-washy about it, I absolutely believe it's the right way to go. I absolutely believe that it's transformational effects. I just know the reality of where my different clients are in their journeys.
There are also a lot of places that have decided that like we're going to do the Agile, and there are a lot of ways, like being religious about it is really difficult, right? Because there are a lot of ways to adopt good Agile-like things and affect great change in organizations, and you don't have to do the capital A Agile to do that. There are also other places where someone's walked in, or people, well-meaning people have walked into organizations and said, we're going to do the Agile, and haven't done it particularly well, and then they have turned off an entire organization from it, right? Maybe people here have seen that happen, right? And then suddenly everyone is super angry about Agile not working, we're not doing Agile. And so then we can be Agile-like, or we can do Agile things, and we don't have to do the capital A Agile and cross every T and dot every I. And the only way it works is if we do it the only one true and right way.
I think what she said, what we're saying is it's not a requirement for DevOps, but it certainly enables it.
It certainly
It's
does.
not a religion, but I think the consensus with the team is that it's not that we are lukewarm. You need agile practices, but the definition of agile actually matters. It's all about making sure that while agile gives you the ability to speed up the dev velocity,
Exactly.
you need to make sure that you have the right set of disciplines and practices with CI/CD. We talked about continuous testing, continuous monitoring, so that the ultimate goal is to basically drive towards those 5 different drivers, right? Agility, or time to market, customer experience, security, and costs.
Yeah, but not just the tech stuff, working in small batches, WIP limits,
Exactly.
visualizations, all the other good stuff.
So it's a great big bucket of it depends, and you need to be thoughtful and specific and pragmatic about what you're doing. Do not adopt something simply to adopt it.
Exactly.
This is not about consistency for the sake of consistency, right? Consistency is the hobgoblin of the small-minded. Got to get the plug-in from one of my daughter's things that she throws at me every so often. But there's being very intentional about what you're doing, and I think that's what we're saying is across, whether it's DevOps, whether it's Agile principles, it is being very intentional and specific about the why you're doing it and what you're trying to achieve.
Do you want to take one last question? I think, okay.
Thank you very much for an excellent discussion. So I'll keep it quick. One quick question I have is, when you're combining development and
Mike?
operations together.
Mike.
Can you hear me now? Sorry.
Yeah, oh, yes.
So when you're combining the development and operations together, there's a lot of challenges right there, both in stability and product quality, and not to mention a slew of security issues, right? And then when you put it in cloud, it brings in another layer of stability, make it agile with a small a, and security issues, right? So then the question is, now we're talking about, is it a private cloud versus public cloud? That brings in yet another layer of complexities and your ability to control things and so on. So I'm wondering, doing the DevOps in a cloud environment, private versus cloud versus public. Do you have any thoughts on that? Is there a preference? Is one better than the other?
It depends. Can I jump in?
No, please go ahead.
It depends. So for the most part, your public versus private cloud should quite often usually depend on what your workload looks like, right? So private cloud should probably be used for really stable workloads. Public cloud should be used for bursting from a purely cost-based perspective. Sometimes you'll have people going to or sticking with private cloud for security concerns or risk concerns, but like for the most part, those have been alleviated unless you have a super risky board or someone who hasn't done any of their reading.
Yeah,
Am I totally wrong?
No, actually, you're right. It goes back to understanding the requirements and the imperatives. Security plays in, the mindset that goes with that. Your DevOps practices are going to apply
Anywhere.
whether it's cloud-based, public or private. I think probably the bigger challenge than one or the other is most of my clients are hybrid because ultimately they've invested a lot in their own data centers, in their own implementations, and now they're leveraging what I call cloud pieces, right? They're starting that. And so they are trying to understand how to go across that continuum. I actually think that that's the bigger conversation and challenge, not I'm just going cloud because this is something net new, but what do I do when I have integrations to services that I have on premise that data is so important to me that I'm not willing to move it? But my new processes are cloud-based. How do I make sure that I've got the throughput and the security? Every boundary crossing is another performance hit, for example. How do I make sure that I have the auditing and those types of things handled?
But then a lot of that's also just education and communication.
Yeah, true.
But your DevOps practices and processes should, in large, be about the same.
I mean, it comes to the forefront when we talk about cloud, because cloud, if I want to leverage, right, not just infrastructure as a service, but if I talk about my ability to architect so that I can have distributed compute, well, that changes what I'm building, right? So I'm building smaller things, more discrete. I'm using microservice patterns for this. Well, that means that those are smaller. And it means that ties back into small batches, which ties back into DevOps, which ties back into Agile. So there is this convergence when we talk about DevOps and cloud for that reason.
For me, I think cloud offers capacity. I think so historically, right, on-prem, building out infrastructures to enable this continuous testing, continuous development, and being able to spin up capacity, tear down capacity quickly, right, within that sprint. That's difficult to do internally. So I think cloud is a huge enabler for that, in terms of really enabling the SDLC pipeline. And in terms of where does the I'm not sure if you were thinking of cloud relative to DevOps or cloud relative to do I put my apps in the cloud or do I public or private, and those are decisions based again on a whole slew of different criteria. I think cloud still, so my perspective, cloud I think still scares people because they see it as something way out there. But I look at cloud as just an extension of our organization. It's another data center, right? It's all it is, right? It's another data center.
Well,
it may be here, it may be there, it may be, somewhere else. It's another data center. So it's a matter of how you leverage that data center effectively and efficiently. And for us, AWS or Azure or whatever you use, right, that ability to on-demand spin up 50, 60, 80, 100 VMs, right, that's my need. That's our need, right? And that's how we use the cloud.
So I could turn this into a whole nother hour conversation about the cloud continuum between infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and SaaS. Yep. So as I have clients that have their own data center and they're now looking to understand a COTS mentality of a SaaS, but they want the configurations and they want to be able to experiment on premise, right, how do I get that on premises before I move it to cloud? There's a whole nother, probably hour good conversation at least.
Okay. Thank you very much, ladies,
Thank you.
for a lively debate, and thank you everyone for attending our presentations. If you have further questions, all of us are on Twitter. Unfortunately, it's not there. I'm at Aruna13. Do you guys want to give out your Twitter handles? Feel free to reach out to us, and we are happy to answer any questions you guys might have.
At Tracy Bannon.
Slide 6123.
At Nicole FV.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.